Hey, I just got back from lunch. Did you finish that report yet?
Well, not exactly. Still working on it. I'm not finished just yet. I got a little sidetracked, but I will get them to you first thing this afternoon.
It is first thing this afternoon.
Well, yeah, I understand that, but I mean, I am working on
But
it. I'll have.
what do you mean that the report isn't finished yet?
I'm still in the process of working on it. I've just been a little distracted.
Distracted. Our meeting starts in an hour.
I can have it.
No. What were you doing? Were you listening to another hunting podcast again? I swear, I give the staff in this office the freedom to do whatever they want to do as long as they meet a deadline. That is the first bullet underneath your job description. Pays attention to detail and deadlines. And deadlines. With emphasis. Dude, are you even listening to me right now?
Welcome back to the Whitetail Distraction Podcast. This is Charles, and for the first time in 3 years, I will be riding solo on this episode. It looks like Brother Austin needed a little paternity leave because he just had his baby today as we record this episode. So I decided, since I'm riding solo, that I will start the series that we are going to call the Local Deer Slayer series or just Deer Slayer series, not sure yet. But I have a guy from the other side of PA. He is going to be our first guest. This is somebody that was introduced to us through a post that we put on Instagram, and someone reached out and said, hey, check this guy out. So we got him on. But before we get into all the good details, we have to talk a little bit about our sponsors, so I'm going to cover those really quick. First and foremost, Scree Gear, ScreeGear.com. We do have a discount code running right now that is WDP20, all caps. That will get you 20% off your first purchase, and I will tell you right now, you will not be disappointed. This stuff is absolutely incredible. I would suggest if you're like me and you're last minute and you still want something for the deer season here in PA, the state opener on October 2nd, then you need to order now because I believe you can still get the clothing in. I'm not going to guarantee it, but I think if you order now, you'll still get the clothing in. At least what I would suggest is go with the base layers, the 150 top and bottom. Start there, maybe get a neck warmer, maybe the gaiter. Those are my favorite pieces. You got to get merino wool in your system, guys. It is a must. I won't use the GC word, but it's a must. Second, VIP from Texas is absolutely incredible company. They have one of the most badass broadheads on the market right now. It is just an absolute stud killing broadhead. Get yourself out there. It's on sale right now for $40 for 3 of them. That's going to last you a long time. Go do it. But I can't say enough about Out on a Limb Manufacturing. Out on a Limb MFG.com. My boy Matt Garris, he is crushing it right now with the Hush stand. He's got the Shakar sticks. He's got platforms, the Ridge Runner. He's got the Shakar one stick out. The guy is just absolutely killing the game. He's only 3 weeks behind on production, which I shouldn't say behind. He's 3 weeks out from the time you put in an order till it's on your front door. So nobody else in the game is doing that right now. He's doing it consistently. Last but not least, NewCanoe, newcanoe.com. Go check them out. Some of the best kayaks in the game. They have them for all of your different size needs, price needs. That's where you want to be if you're looking for a kayak, something quality. Deer season's coming up. Maybe you're a waterfowl hunter and you need something that you can put a duck blind over and you're not going to fall in the water, cold temperatures, because the stability is absolutely insane. So go check them out. And that's it. Quick and easy, down and dirty. Let's go ahead and get Jason Goe on. Like I said, Jason is a local Northeast guy, and he's going to kick off our new series, the Deer Slayer series. All right, guys, here we are. We have Jason Goe on the line. Jason, what's going on, man?
How you doing tonight?
I am doing fantastic, buddy. How are you tonight?
I'm pretty good. I'm just hanging out, looking forward to some time in the woods.
I heard, before we started this, because I got a sneak peek into your life, I heard that you may have colored an arrow already. Is that correct?
I've colored a couple arrows already. I also left one go in the woods too. So we're not going to talk about that. But I mean, yeah, No, I was able to get a couple does so far in Maryland. Maryland season started, I guess, about a week or so ago, and I got a couple doe, which was awesome.
That is awesome. I did a little intro before this kind of introduced where I heard from you, and I haven't mentioned any names or anything, but Lane actually reached out to me from In the Presence, and he reached out on Instagram. We made a post about, hey, who are some of the local guys out there that nobody really knows about, like on the, I don't know, on like the podcast level or just on like a higher level that are just born killers in the outdoors. And you were one of the first ones that came up. So that's where we got you from. And besides that little introduction, as far as I know you, I want you to get in a little bit on your own introduction, just kind of introduce who you are, where you're from, and what you do for work.
All right. Well, I mean, I already feel like I'm kind of, that's a pretty big title, born killer, but my name is Jason Goe, and I live in southeastern Pennsylvania in a little town called Holtwood, kind of along the Susquehanna River. And I'm an industrial electrician by trade. I went to trade school, and I've been doing that for a little over 20 years now. I'm married with 2 young children. I have an 8 and a 5-year-old. And I just you know how it is when you work. You try to find what free time you can, but I try to spend a lot of it in the woods. And I love archery hunting, primarily for whitetail deer. I do like spring turkey, and the last few years I've gotten to things like hunting sika deer on the eastern shore with my bow, and just anything outdoors. I like kayaking, biking. I used to skateboard a lot. I'm into archaeology and Native American artifacts. So yeah, I have a lot of hobbies, but my top ones are hunting related or outdoors related for sure.
That's freaking awesome. The archaeology part and artifacts from Native Americans and whatnot. That's pretty cool. What's the coolest thing you've ever found?
Well, it was kind of funny. The town I grew up in is a little north of where I live now. Is a town called Washington Borough.
Okay.
And that area is known for Native Americans. And when I was a little kid, I used to go walk around the farmers' fields and find artifacts. And people in the area knew I had a pretty good collection. Well, when I was about 14, I believe, 13 or 14, some archaeologists from the state, from Pennsylvania, were in the area, and they wanted to see my collection. I don't know how they heard about it, but they looked at my collection, and it turned out I had found Clovis points, which are crazy rare. They're the points used to hunt woolly mammoths, mastodon. They're about the oldest artifact. Yeah, they're about the oldest artifact you can find in the country, and I'd found some. And these guys were like in awe about this. Well, it kind of they took me to a couple artifact shows, and I went to some things at state. I ended up winning. They created an award for me. It was called the Shadler George Youth Award for Archaeology, and I got that site named after me. It's the Jason Goe site. And then I also have that same year, my buddy Jim Doubts and I, we kind of discovered or registered, I think it was like 14 or 15 other archaeological sites that were all Native American artifacts. So it was pretty cool as a young teenager. It was kind of like Goonies, like finding like a treasure. It was pretty awesome.
Exactly. Dude, that is absolutely incredible. That's something that I never would have thought I would have got into on this podcast with you, but I think that stuff's so interesting and so incredible, especially, the Native American artifacts and whatnot. And those points, I mean, holy crap, man.
Well,
like, were they, all right, let's bring it back to hunting then. What do you think they were, like 150s, 200s? What
do you mean? With the animals they were shooting?
No. I'm talking the point, the actual field points.
Oh, the weights. I'm sorry. They definitely weren't expandables or mechanical. That's for sure.
Okay.
Some of them do seem to have a single bevel, so I mean they are pretty trendy. But
do you think they're using high FOC? That's what I want to know.
Yeah. For sure. I mean, I guess I don't know. I mean, I think they use cane reed a lot of times, and I didn't weigh the points, but I would assume that it probably had a pretty high FOC. You got to imagine you get a little more stability out of high FOC stuff, so it probably helped if their arrows were a little crooked or whatever. But
they were probably
I don't know. I have no idea.
Arrows into those animals, like just
yeah. Well, that's what's crazy to me is like being a hunter and kind of tying my hobbies together. Like thinking of when you find like a point like that, and to think like the life that individual. First of all, I'm probably the first person to pick it up in 10,000 years. But the idea that the person that made that was hunting to live and survive, and the life they lived, and the way the area looked, all that stuff just boggles my mind. I just think it's super cool.
No, I'm right there with you. I love making little jokes like that, but I mean, it is absolutely hilarious. But I could only imagine trying to take down an animal like that with archery equipment, especially the archery equipment they were using, compared to what we complain about today, that we don't have the best and fastest bow and whatnot. It's just kind of funny when you bring it all back, and it's humbling to see something like that was around for so many years, like you said, just laying around, and you happen to stumble across it. I mean, who knows? Someone could have taken that thing and skipped it across a creek or something at one point and never knew what they had. It's incredible.
When every time the farmer plows those fields, those plows basically tear and break everything up. So it's amazing it survives,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that is awesome, dude. So you mentioned that you are from basically the Lancaster area. Is that accurate? I mean,
That's correct.
Okay. So from my side of the state, what we think of is basically on your side is Harrisburg, Philadelphia, Lancaster, and that's pretty much it. That's the only thing we know, and but I see really good deer getting killed out of your area all the time. Every year it seems like it's outrageous.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. There's couple, 2 or 3 larger cities in the area. I mean, they're good places to go eat or whatever, take your wife out, but everything in between, or a lot of in between, and even some of the stuff up against places like Philly, you see the Seek 1 guys, there's similar situations around Philly, Baltimore, all these things where, you can get into suburban hunting. The one guy we hunt with, in the Presence, Tim, he's actually on a few really good buck right now. They're in a kind of an urban area. He actually was hunting a funnel the other day that was between a swimming pool and a trampoline. So, it was funny, but I mean, that's where the deer were funneling through to this spot. So, he's still trying to get in on these buck, but really the areas that area I live, it's a lot of farming. There's a lot of crop fields, and really this section of the state, especially when you get kind of east of here, it's a lot of real open fields and not a whole lot of woods, but so the patches of timber are smaller. But here, right where I live, right in this area, I consider it the River Hills. The Susquehanna River, which pretty much runs north to south through the state of Pennsylvania. Everything along the river is kind of like a rolling. I was in Wisconsin in Buffalo County. I hunted there one time, and it was very similar to that. So I don't know if people know what that's about. But, you get these hills. They're not mountains. They're hills that go from anywhere from maybe 300 to 500 feet in elevation from the bottom to the top. And they go down to the river, come up off the river and kind of roll back, and you get these drainage systems, streams and springs kind of along there. So you get a good mix of rolling habitat. And those chunks of woods around there hold some really big deer. And then, again, there's little patches of woods that kind of east of here that are in the middle of a big field. Not many guys can probably have access to those pieces. They're usually private. And, deer can get big in those areas as well.
Yeah, I would say as I drive through that area, it looks like pretty much whitetail mecca land. I mean, it's just beautiful the way it's laid out with the ag fields and the real big, high, I mean, I guess some people that are from flat ground would call them mountains, but you're right, they're basically just really big hills. Although, I mean, some of that stuff can get pretty nasty too. It's way up there. You're driving down, say you're driving across on Interstate 80 or something, and you start getting near the Susky. It starts getting pretty steep in some areas. Pretty nasty.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you get pretty much Harrisburg is the cutoff, in my opinion, or even just looking at the area where it goes from kind of rolling hills to actually what's considered mountains, like the Appalachian Mountains. The Appalachian Trail is just north of Harrisburg. And yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how high some of those mountains are up there, but it's pretty steep and it's pretty big stuff.
Yeah. So you're saying after that it gets kind of more of the more or less rolling hills, not as quite as big and nasty.
Yeah, it's pretty much from Harrisburg the whole way down to the Chesapeake Bay. Yeah. There's that kind of that rolling hill country along the river, and that stuff there, like I said, that's where I grew up, hunting that kind of stuff. And that's, it gave me good exposure to different kinds of terrain, how deer use terrain and that kind of thing.
So that's a perfect segue then to the first portion of this whole series is kind of the describing the area of land that you hunt. We're in the Northeast region, you're in Eastern Pennsylvania, like you said, but maybe if you could get into what you're familiar hunting, is it that same type of terrain you're just now describing, or do you travel a little bit and hunt something a little different?
Yeah, well, I definitely hunt, like I said, the river hills, and there's sections of those river hills that drop down to the river where it gets very level, and it almost becomes like there's have cattail marshes, some frag grass, swampy areas. So that gets almost like marsh, kind of like marsh country. I also do go up to the mountains. When I say the mountains, like I go to the Pocono Mountains and then up and along the Appalachian Trail. I hunt those mountains as well regularly, not probably a dozen or so times a year. I'll go up there and hunt the big woods. But I have my most experience, I guess, probably I would say in the hill country areas. And then it's probably tied for second between marsh habitat and mountain habitat. I guess that's kind of probably about the mix that I hunt.
Okay. And I guess another portion of that, are you mostly focusing on private land or public land?
Yeah, pretty much everything I hunt, minus me. Like I own where I live, my house. I live on 9 acres. That's my only private property I can hunt. Everything else I hunt is public. Everything else I hunt is public. I rarely I might have a friend who will say like, hey, you want to come to my farm and help kill a doe or two, that kind of thing. But it's super rare. In most cases, I'm targeting public areas. Now, locally, that usually consists of like anywhere from like a 5 to maybe 200 acre patch of public land. Now, when you go up to northern PA, or northeastern PA, you obviously get the big woods, and you get some pretty giant pieces of public property there.
Right, some big woods there.
Yeah, and I guess, I don't know, these areas around here, these smaller, like some of them are super small. There's some that are only like 2 or 3 acres. They can get pressured pretty hard. It gets pretty nasty. That's what usually pushes me to go north, is that I get tired of dealing with a bunch of people and confining property lines. And I like to go places I can roam and not have everybody around me.
Do you think that's because it's closer to major city, or just because everybody in Pennsylvania pretty much hunts?
It's probably a little of both. I can say around 2008 or whatever, when we had like the economic stuff happen.
Yep.
I noticed that people that would normally go north, they were forced, I guess, because there were limited resources or whatever. I noticed a lot more pressure locally in like deer season and turkey season. Guys seem to stay more local then. But yeah, I guess because these areas are a lot more highly populated, and the guys that want to go out after work for a couple hours, it's more convenient to go locally than it is to drive an hour or two to the mountains or whatever.
Yeah, we see the same around here, and it's not to kind of play that game of private versus public. I don't like to give bonus points for people that hunt public, but public land in Pennsylvania is, it's a different animal. We hunt it here. I hunted up my camp, kind of the same situation, which you're talking about. Big woods, public land, anybody can hunt there. It gets pressured really heavily. But just to give kind of the listeners an idea of what we're referring to here so they can relate, I guess is the whole reason behind that question. So you answered the pressure question. I guess the local stuff's more pressured than whenever you go north and you hunt the big woods. It just makes sense. Lower population up north, bigger woods, easier to get away from people. What other challenges would you say that you face in these areas? And I kind of like this dialect between your local and your up north hunting, because it's very relatable to what we do as well.
Other challenges, obviously, like finding areas that you can be confident in. That's always a challenge, be it these small pieces of ground locally or the bigger areas up north. I just don't go kind of take shots in the dark a lot of time. I like to I personally like to do a lot of research. I look at maps a lot. I work a 12-hour swing shift at my job, and in the middle of the night, I'll be sitting at break just looking at like my maps and just trying to figure out where the next hot spot could be. And locally, a challenge, is when you find these pieces of ground, just because you find a 100-acre piece of public property, it might be pressured like crazy, but also is there something there worth hunting? I like to try to target bigger, slightly older age class animals. And, they're just not everywhere. You just don't go everywhere and find that. I do try to stay realistic. I don't usually plan on shooting a 180, around my house. They don't happen. They happen very rarely, But something over 120 is definitely a good deer for most areas I hunt. And that becomes a realistic goal for me a lot. That's kind of what I shoot for. But, yeah, up north, another challenge is, like, just access. One thing I really like to do is one thing I try to pride myself in is really creative accessing properties. I'll use canoes, kayaks, boats, bikes. I'll do whatever I can to do something different. As long as it's legal, I'll do something different to access a piece of ground. And that can be a challenge, yes, but if you look at, when you're looking at your maps, if you see that everybody's probably coming in from the east and you can find a way to get in from the west, you're already a leg up over most people. That's the kind of things I look for.
So if and hopefully when they do legalize like e-bikes in Pennsylvania, do you think that's something you would utilize to access?
I try to. There's a level, in my opinion, there's a level of kind of like where technology starts to kind of push the limits.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even for me, like cell cameras, I don't have a problem with people using those, but I do like if somebody has like a tight funnel at their house and they have a cell camera that told them a big buck walked through there this morning, and then they go in that night and they kill it. It was legal, it was ethical, I get it, but I just feel like it robbed the experience. So the e-bike thing to me, like I can appreciate it. And I think as I get older, I probably appreciate something I don't have to pedal the whole time. So I'm not going to say I'll never use an e-bike, but where I'm at right now, the feeling of earning what I get is really rewarding to me, and I feel like certain things rob that, and I don't want to do that right now.
Yeah, and I've seen on your Instagram you're the crazy one that works a 12-hour shift and goes out and kayaks to calm down afterwards. It's like you just tick differently. So I get that, dude. And we talked about it on the last episode. I think that we did, Austin and I, about cell cams, because I recently did buy some, and I agree with you 1,000%. I would never use them in that aspect of, oh, there's a buck here now, I got to get going and go kill it. That's just not it. But, for the most part, we're Saturday warriors, as we recalled ourselves, because we don't get many Sundays here in PA.
Yep.
In fact, we only get 2. So, what I thought was the best use for cell cams in my personal situation is to go all week long where I'm kind of collecting data while I can't put the time in the woods because of work. And that's kind of a shame, but in reality, it's kind of have to do my scouting for me to have a higher success rate, I would think.
Well, no, and that's awesome. I mean, even regular cameras, people use them to try to gain knowledge and intel, right? And I don't have a problem with that. I mean, I'm sure you've done it too, where you put a regular trail camera out and you're all excited to pull it. Maybe it's been out for 2 months soaking at a spot, and you're excited to get that camera, and you go find that the battery, something didn't work right, or a bear knocked it over, 2 days into it or whatever, and you never got it. So that to me, like, is where cell cams shine. Is that the ability to know that your camera's working and you're pulling data like you should be for the amount of time you decided to leave that camera there.
Yeah.
I like that. I respect it. I've talked about getting them. I have about a half dozen cameras, no cell cameras right now, but it's like where I hunt up north, it's about 2.5, 3 hours away. Mm-hmm. So for me it's not like the kind of thing where I can just go pull, camera card, do a card pull quick. It's a big to do. I wish I had 2 or 3 cell cams or more up there, like you said, doing the scouting for me just to kind of see what's going on.
Yep. I agree. Same thing with where my camp is. It's almost 2-hour drive away, and it would be nice to get one up there if I could find one that worked with the cell coverage. That's the only problem I have right now. So I bought one with Verizon coverage, hoping that's going to work, and we shall see, because I have one that's been up there, non-cell camera that's been up there since January, and I haven't pulled it since, so hoping that has some interesting stuff. But what we typically do up there in the big woods, too, is we'll just leave one go, let it sit for pretty much an entire year and don't check it. The problem with that is, like last year, you go and check it, and guess what? Camera's gone. Someone stole it. Man. So you just let it soak for somebody else for an entire year, and that really gets under my skin.
Oh, that's the worst. Yeah, people, I just can't stand people being unethical. That just bothers the heck out of me.
Yeah. It's unreal, man.
When you leave your camera out like that for a long period of time, is that usually like a new area you're trying to gain intel, or is that an existing spot you just want to know what's around?
It is typically new areas that we're trying to gain intel on without my own human pressure in there. So I know for even a local spot, I did that a couple years ago. I put a camera in a new area close to where I usually hunt, but I always wanted to try. It's one of them spots. Everybody has a couple of them spots where they really want to try it, and they look at it looks so good, whether it's public land, private land piece. It's like, you know what, screw it. I'll just put a camera in there for an entire year. I won't go in there and hunt it. I'll hunt my other spots that I know are good. And then next year I'll pull it and see what I see. And I pulled it and had all these bucks on it. All these great pictures. and I gained all this intel. So the next year, Austin and I went in, and, he basically, he had some of those dates in which I had bucks moving in daylight. He went in and killed a buck the next year.
That's awesome. That's so awesome.
Right. And that's what we try to do when we leave them up all year round, is we just try to gain that intel so you can hope to use some kind of historical data, especially up in the big woods where deer move a lot. They're constantly from this spot to this spot to that spot based on food changes and pressure changes and everything else. So that's the end goal. But yeah, that's basically what I do it for.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So next, I kind of want to, and I put this on here and I sent it to you. I want to know a little bit more about your hunter, and I'm going to air quote, resume. So I just want to, just talk and touch on more of kind of the hunter you are and what your strengths are in the woods and whatnot. But maybe you can touch on a little bit of what, your successes looked like over the last 5 or 10 years. And I want you to get into all animals, sika and, whitetail and everything else, deer related that you've been, because I know you have a pretty impressive resume, if you want to call it.
Well, all right. I guess I've been hunting for almost 30 years. I'm 40 years old, so I started hunting like most people in Pennsylvania when I turned 12. It took me 3 years to kill my first deer. I killed a deer, a pretty decent 8-point with a bow and the Poconos. That was my first deer. And since then, I kind of got hooked, right? But then, through like high school, and I went to trade school and all of that, especially in high school, hunting was more casual to me. But sometime around like my late teens, early 20s, my love for the outdoors meshed with the hunting, and it just became, archery hunting especially, became more of a passion for me. Like, just, I wanted to be out. I wanted to learn more. I know that I was just reading like Deer and Deer Hunting magazine, and I was in some other like magazines and watching hunting shows, and just, I wanted to learn more about it. I wanted to become better at it, because my dad, he's a great outdoorsman, a really awesome outdoorsman. He's super, his woodsmanship's up there with anybody else, but he's kind of a casual hunter. He just likes to go out and, like, if he kills a deer, cool, but he doesn't like push to get to be better, or I don't know. And I wanted to get better at it. It's just something I wanted to do. So in my 20s, I really started trying to learn more and gain more knowledge. And I did notice that, I was able to get on better deer, bigger deer, and finally start killing decent deer. I didn't kill a good buck till in 2004 when I killed my first good deer. And then I kind of, just try to repeat that process, but always still trying to learn. That's my big thing, is like, I try to stay humble. I appreciate the title, like, killer and stuff, but in the end of the day, like, I try to like always be learning. I try to surround myself with people who are like-minded, that, have unique ways of doing things. I try to learn from them, and I maybe they'll learn from me. That's cool too. But, yeah, so, I started getting on some good deer in my early 20s. Also, where I work, I'm off 2 weeks a month. I work a 12-hour swing shift. So I got a lot more free time after, I got a full-time job. And I have a very patient wife who lets me hunt a lot. She calls herself a hunting widow from pretty much, September to January. So she gets it. She's cool. But yeah, so I like to try to be, use that woodsmanship that I have and use that in my hunting. I try to learn like what trees deer are targeting as far as oak types, or, mass trees, browse, that kind of thing. I try to, think outside the box a lot with the way I do things. Like I said, my accesses, I try to be really creative the way I access stuff. And, I don't know, I'm not sure how many deer I've killed, or I don't keep like that kind of count of stuff.
No, and that's kind of not the whole point of, I guess, the actual question itself. And the more I think about it as I sit here and trying to come up with a way to do this series and break it down by each section, I kind of want to give the listener, a little bit of background, who you are, and, the area, kind of what you hunt, and then go into more or less of, there's a lot of people out there that they like to talk about themselves. If I was to answer this same question, it'd be very hard for me to do it as well, because it is kind of an awkward thing when hunting is such a humbling experience and such a humbling sport that we participate in. Yeah. So I get it. I totally get it. But, I also want to tell people out there that, you're on the show because you are very successful. That's why we have you on this series. Like you have been, and you can be humble about it because I appreciate that. But you know, there are people out there that think the highest of you, and that's why we have you on. And I think that's awesome.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I definitely love it, and I'm trying to think of like ways to talk about what I do. You know, it's hard to think about what I do differently. I can tell you, like, I've grown as a hunter for sure. Like I said, I originally used to be very like hang on stands and have pre-hung stuff and only go to a certain amount of spots. I had hang-ons in these certain spots that I go to every year, and that was like in my teens. You know, there's just areas I went to with my dad. But as I grew as a hunter, I started to learn how to read maps and branch out and find new areas. And there was a period of time in my late teens, early 20s, where I had a whole pile of hang-on stands, and I had spots all over the state. I mean, I had like 30 tree stands scattered all over PA. And, you know, it was overwhelming to prep these spots, first of all, but also, like, you know, you try to spread your time out to hunt those spots, and you weren't even hunting half the spots. But being that we hunt pressured stuff like we talked about, you know, when you have a pile of spots, you by the time the season gets here and after a couple of weeks, you learn where everybody's going, and you can almost write off a third of those spots right off the bat. Like, okay, those areas are pressure or hammer, don't, you know, waste your time there. But, you know, so that's what I do with it when I have those spots. But as I got kind of more like focused on better deer, I stopped just hunting everywhere and started thinking about what areas were truly productive for what I was looking for. And anymore now, I kind of hunt less areas, but I have several spots in those good areas. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I don't really I don't have 30 tree stands over the state. I have like 20 spots in a few areas. But yeah, I guess I got off topic a little bit about my history.
No, that's fine.
Trying to think
No, so you're more of a mobile hunter now than what you used to be. I mean, you kind of gone through that whole progression of what I call, you know, a Pennsylvania hunter, more or less.
Yeah. I mean, I always had when I first started dating my wife, she bought me, I think it was for my birthday, a climbing tree stand, and up to that point I had only used like a ladder tree stand. So that's when I started being quote mobile a little bit.
Yep.
And so for years I kind of had a couple pre-hung stands and then a bunch of pre-hung stands, but I always had that climber kind of in my back pocket where I'd move around and try different spots. Today for sure, I have a couple very light mobile setups with, you know, like a hang-on and sticks, or different step types. I really like hand climber, a lone wolf hand climber. And then, you know, then I do still use a few pre-hung stands in certain areas that seem to be productive.
Yeah. Now, are those hung in kind of the areas like your typical pinch points or rut spots, or just kind of like favorite places that have been successful year over year?
It can be both. You know, you talked about how you were looking for like new areas to try.
Yep.
I do the same thing with sometimes I'll do like set pre-hung stands for observation type sets where I'll watch over kind of a mountainside or like a creek bottom or whatever.
Yeah.
So
like
some of the pre-hungs, some of those might be that from observation. I mean, you have maybe a slight expectation of shooting something out of those trees, but you don't. It's not necessarily your main goal. But you know, yeah, a lot of the pre-hung stands that I do are spots that have proven consistent for years. You know, and there's those, you know, those kind of game shows you see in the big woods, like maybe on a bench, where you know that even if buck A that you've been after for 2 years is dead or died of old age or whatever, you know, the buck B, C, and D will still, as they move through that area, there's certain places they'll walk, there's certain areas they'll bed, and, you know, those are the things that I try to target, you know, like with those pre-hung stands. You know, when you get into some of the places in the big woods where it's like, you know, a few miles to get back in, or maybe you got a kayak and then climb a mountain, it is pretty sweet to have a stand there waiting for you. You know, it's like, okay, cool, one less thing I got to do today.
Yeah.
But I mean, I will say this, and it's something I've noticed the last few years, is that I have walked past some super hot sign to go to a pre-hung stand only to not see deer. And I knew in the back of my head I should have, if I would have had a mobile setup that day, I probably would have set up on the hot sign and been better off, I'm sure.
Man,
and so that's as I evolve, you know, and as you evolve as a hunter, like as I evolve anyway, like you kind of get that, you gain that knowledge, like, hey man, wake up, like stop walking over, you know, a good scrape line or whatever, you know, a bunch of fresh tracks or fresh poop, whatever it is. to go to a spot that you like hung back in March or whatever that isn't going to produce for you.
Yeah, that is absolutely excellent advice, and that's probably one I haven't even thought about from the fixed standpoint that I know I've done a million times. You walk past some really good stuff, oh, hey, look, fresh rub, and look at all this feeding sign, but my stand's another half a mile, better get going. And like you said, you do that, and some of it also, the way that I was thinking about this as you were saying it could also be that deterrent. Well, this is just too close to the truck. I can't hunt here. It's too close. You're not going to see. This is all nighttime. You're not going to see deer. And sometimes those spots can be the best too.
For sure, I have probably about a third of the spots I have in Maryland, particularly where I'm hunting right now, are within sight of the road or the parking lot or a hiking trail.
Yeah.
And the doe I killed yesterday, I watched a mountain biker go by from 25 yards away on the trail. He rode past, and I was like, "There goes a guy." Cool. About 5 minutes later, these deer came across the trail, down over the hill to me, and I was able to get a shot at the one. So people probably walk by and think, "No way, I'm going to sit by this trail," and it worked out. So I agree 100%. You sometimes walk past hot sign by the parking lot to go to that spot 2 miles back, only to know you should have probably sat by the parking lot.
Yeah. There's one spot in a local game lands here that's a small game lands. I don't even know, maybe 80 acres. I don't know how many it is, but it's something that I've looked at year after year and told myself I was going to do, but I haven't done it yet. I went and scouted it. I think it was like turkey season, and there's one spot where you park on this game lands. It's the main one. Everybody walks, and then there's the main trail that goes back in, and it goes back to some fields in the back. Well, as you go back there, there's like a high-rise wall there that sits and overlooks the trail coming in. And of course, there's deer beds. I mean, literally all over that little edge there. There's a couple good ones, big beds, hair in it and everything. And then there's a little escape route that comes right down over the backside of the hill, down, cuts through the corner of the private, back onto the public, across the road, and out the backside into across the street, which is extremely thick and nasty. And I have said it for 3 years now, that I was going to hang over that escape route trail. I mean, it is just absolutely pounded into the ground. 30 yards from the parking lot. I want to hang on that trail and get there super early and wait for that first guy that walks in right down that trail and bumps that deer out the back door. And I haven't done it.
I'm sure it'd be amazing too when we come through there.
And that's one of the things where I think what I need to do to convince myself, and this is where I like trail cameras, I think I need to put a trail camera up on that exact trail and watch and see if I'm correct or not. And then I'll move in. But that's like it's in the back of my head all the time. Same thing. It's that doubt in new spots that sometimes I'm afraid to go to different spots because I know what I can get somewhere else. I don't know if you run into that a lot when you're hunting and you're trying, big woods or new areas. I don't have that so much in the big woods up my camp, but these little local spots where I know the pinch points, I know these little areas that are good. I don't seem to get too creative locally as I would if I travel and I go into big woods. And I don't know what that is, but what would you say, if that was your experience or not?
I agree with kind of what you're saying. And I will say that a lot of times, at least the smaller patches of woods that I hunt locally, that, it is easy to get a little kind of, I guess not necessarily sloppy, but a little lax in certain things. But a lot of times these deer in these smaller areas are getting hammered by pressure way harder than, the deer in the big woods. And it takes even more creativity and more like outside the box thinking a lot of times to get some of these local deer dead, to kill some of these local deer because everybody's going after them. A lot of guys are going after them. The deer know what they got to do to get away from people because they deal with people all the time, so it's kind of, I feel like it's, it's good to think outside the box and try what you can with anywhere really. But I wouldn't, if there's something you think in the back of your head, like that little voice, that you hear that you're talking about, I try to listen to that because that, it does prove to be right a lot, and I don't know if that harkens back to those arrowheads and, eons of us hunting things that, that little voice that's talking, but there's definitely that inner voice that helps a lot of times.
I like that. I like the thought on that. And I think you're right. I would agree that the deer locally, And it's a very similar. We have a very similar situation. Our deer locally are pretty well pounded when it comes to pressure here. And they definitely, I would say, to get a really good one, especially on these public lands that are just crushed with pressure, you probably do need to do something crazy like that. 5 feet off the road, hanging, watching cars drive underneath you until that buck finally gets up and walks off that hillside and to cross the road from somebody coming out of the woods early or somebody going in to get set up. I think that it might be the year. You might have convinced me.
Well, and a lot of times too, like when I considered a lot of pressure in Pennsylvania, then I started hunting Maryland about 4 years ago, and I went to some of the local, when I say local, the stuff that's maybe within an hour of my house, pieces of public area in Maryland, and a lot of the pressure that you see down there are other Pennsylvania hunters, actually a lot of times more than Maryland guys. But what I considered pressured in PA, then I went to Maryland, and I was like, holy crap. Like, some of the places down there, it was insane. Like, where I would leave an area in Pennsylvania if there was more than 2 cars in the parking lot.
Yeah.
Down there, you show up, and there's 10 cars, and you're like, what's going on? But that forced me to kind of, like, rethink how I hunted. And it also forced me to start, and you hear this from other people, too, like, to actually almost hunt the hunters. And I don't mean actually go after them, but I mean, like, learn their habits, learn what these guys are doing. So what I ended up doing a lot of times down in Maryland, and now I've since doing it in PA, is I pay attention to where guys are going. I pay attention to where, where the people sign is, tacks or ribbons, fresh cut stuff, or like shooting lanes. And if you can, I mean, a lot of times you got to go, it's kind of a roundabout way of figuring it out, but if you can eliminate chunks of that area where because guys are hammering those certain areas for whatever reason, easy access, a big rub along a hiking trail that, attracts everybody, whatever it is, then you find the gaps where people aren't going. And that's what you look for. Sometimes those gaps are only, an acre or two, briar thicket, beside the parking lot or whatever. But that's where I've done really well down there. And I've done, and like I said, I brought that mentality back to TA, and some of these local areas around here now that I had walked away from because of quote pressure, and I've gone back. And, a lot of times the creative thinking or the thing outside the box, it doesn't necessarily mean like, skydiving into a tree. That would work, I guess, but,
that's a great idea.
Yeah, exactly. It's always like hung up in the tree. But, no, my point is like, as long as you're doing something different than everybody else, the average guy, if everybody else is just walking in on one entry route and just walking, they're walking in. If you can bike in and go a little further than them, you're going to be better off. If you can find a different route and walk in just a different way, you're going to be better than everybody else a lot of times. So, being creative doesn't necessarily mean like going to extremes. It just means figuring out what everybody else is doing and doing it a little different, or going a little further or staying a little closer, those kinds of things.
I would agree with you 100%. And, it's definitely something that we do as well as far as patterning people rather than deer. And it's kind of a bummer because, if you are that Saturday hunter, you're that weekend guy, you maybe even a Friday, Saturday hunter, it's tough because you're not sure where other people have been Monday through Thursday. You know what I mean? So it's kind of, that, I guess it goes back to what I said, maybe in the last episode and earlier today, trail cameras, cell cams. I have a spot right now that I'm seeing deer in daylight, and then all of a sudden, guess what? Some guys were riding quads through there right at dusk. And now the deer are coming out at night. So that's something that I can pick up on. I know there's pressure in there. It's different pressure, but it still has pushed back those deer from coming out to that spot, maybe 30 minutes. So maybe I need to be a little closer to where they're bedding. Stuff like that I really appreciate out of the cell cams. I put a camera up last year, and another tactic I use in the big woods, I put a camera up right on the main trail, right where everybody walks in and out. I just wanted to get an idea, and I left it the whole season. Never touched it. I wanted to know how many people were coming in and out and kind of which way they were going. And then I hung another camera, probably 100 yards past that, on a little game trail that came off the main trail where not a lot of people were going. And it was funny. I had all the people on that first trail camera on that main road, and they were just kind of cross and go in one spot. Not a single person on the other one. So that told me that, and of course, where were the deer coming from and where were the deer mostly? On that other camera. So that gives me good intel when I checked that, back in January, February after the season. That was a huge help for me.
For sure. I mean, that, knowledge is power, right? That's awesome. I've done some little tricks, like one area where, you're walking along a hiking trail that's flanked on both sides by briar thickets. And then there's one spot where you kind of can get into that area to get around some of those green briar. I've already have put a limb from a blowdown across that, blocking it. When I left, like on like a Tuesday or whatever, and I was hunting, whatever it was, the next time I came back, I wanted to check if that limb was still in the way. If it was, I assumed no one went through there. If it was moved, I knew someone had been back there. I've already used my foot and like brushed dirt, like cleared leaves off like a less used hiking trail, or maybe like an access into a certain spot to check for footprints, human footprints or deer footprints, but just to gauge if people have been in there. I agree. Trail cameras are great for that. You can also use little tricks, little kind of woods tricks to kind of figure out where people have been. A few years ago, on the first day of PA archery season, you know how that is. The pressure, everybody kind of wants to get out and hunt, right? Yep. Well, there was a spot super deep in this piece of public, and I wanted my brother to go back there because the wind was setting up perfect for deer to bed on this kind of this point with the south wind we had. So I wanted my brother to go back. I wanted to see my brother kill a deer, and he started back the trail, and we weren't sure if anybody had been back there. And I told him, I said, pay attention. If you walk through cobwebs, you're the first person back there. So, that's stuff that some people wouldn't think about, but I mean, we all deal with that, walking through and getting a face full of cobwebs, on a hiking trail. If you're the guy doing that, you're the first person back there at least that day. So that's what my brother used, and he got back in there and he was on deer. So it was pretty cool. But, another trick to kind of keep in your head, let nature kind of help you out too sometimes.
Yeah, and that's why you also use your buddies and you let them walk in front of you, so they're the ones that get all the webs. I use that one quite often.
I just got my friend Mitch, who I hunt with a lot. We were just scouting today before this rain. He gave me crap because he's about 4 inches taller than me, about not knocking the cobwebs down. I'm like, dude, they're the tall ones. I can't get them. I'm not 6'2" like you, but I know what you mean.
Those are little tips and tricks I really like, and I appreciate that. You're basically doing the same thing without the use of mechanical devices such as trail cams, which I appreciate, and never really would have thought of it doing it that way. Putting a simple something. I have done it to an extent where I did it one time. I put I took 3 sticks and I made a teepee right in the center of the trail, because if someone walks past that, they're gonna knock that damn thing down.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
right.
That's like the toddler and everybody. They can't have that tower standing.
Right, exactly. Someone's gonna walk up to that, and one person out of their group's gonna kick the thing over for sure. So I've done that before, and it's worked. It's let me know other people were in there, but I kind of like the brushing away. And I've also seen, like hunting public, they'll scrape a line in the road and see if if someone's tracks come across it, like their vehicle tracks and whatnot come across it.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
that's also a good one. But all right, man. Well, excellent. I mean, we kind of touched on all of this that I really wanted to get to, and we're getting up there a little bit on time, but we're still okay. So we've kind of dug into your tactics and whatnot, but I kind of want to know what areas, kind of terrain that you would say you're most familiar with, or your strongest point is when hunting. Where have you had the biggest success? Is it big woods? Is it these hills? Is it ag? Where would you say you are most familiar with?
I'm most familiar with a little bit of terrain, a little bit of topography. When I hunt the eastern shore for sika, for instance, or whitetail, and it's flat, it's a little more I definitely feel like a fish out of water at times. So I like to have a little bit of roll in the habitat, some terrain, because I've grown up learning how deer use terrain,
perfect,
saddles, funnels, that kind of thing. Because I grew up in these smaller river hills, it's kind of, it's like the same thing you see in the big woods, just kind of shrunk down a little bit. So I use the same, I look for the same things in the big woods I do on these hills, locally. I just, obviously, sometimes, instead of climbing a 100-foot hill, it's 500 feet or whatever. But, things like benches, saddles, are all, I really like finding like drainages on like steep hillsides, because, you know, the deer either go low or high to get around that, especially if there's a lot of rock or stuff or whatever in those drainages. But my favorite thing to hunt, I really love finding is, I like finding thickets near the tops of hills where you'll get buck bedding on the edge of those thickets a lot of times, like the points that come off there. But what it really does is it attracts doe bedding. And I love sitting I've had a lot of success hunting downwind edges of doe bedding, like during the rut. But in general, bedding, I like to find that on these points, on this, you know, and obviously there's terrain.
Yeah.
Like I said, when you're down the eastern shore and it's flat, you'll get points that are made by like softer transition stuff, like you know, like thickets or like frag grass edges, or holly, where you get like, you know, kind of like the tree types or whatever, what makes the points or the areas where these deer bed. But I'm best where I have some terrain.
Okay, so when you say thickets on top of hills, what would you say is your preference there? Are you talking mountain laurel thickets? Or are you talking a clear cut thicket? Are you talking briar thicket? What would you say is like your go-to?
All of those would work.
Okay.
They're all great in their own way. I like one of the issues I have with like a clear cut thicket is, depending how old the clear cut thicket is, it can be both bedding and food.
Correct.
And it's tough sometimes to get deer to necessarily come out of that. So when I have like a clear cut, sometimes you got to go actually into it, because, you know, the edge of it won't get you far, because the deer are living in there. They're bedding, eating, everything they do is in there for the most part. You know, so a clear cut thicket, it works great, and you can set the downwind edge of it for sure, because a lot of times if it's really thick stuff on a clear cut, the path of least resistance is that, you know, maybe that open hardwoods on the downwind edge where you get like a buck will cruise during the rut to scent check it.
Yeah. So
that could be productive. But I'm mostly looking for like a lot of like laurel or briars. You know, the stuff that's really hard to walk through, where a buck wouldn't really want to cut through if he didn't have to. I feel like that kind of that works best for me. Laurel, like some of the laurel thickets, yes, can have oaks growing in them, and then you get almost the same thing you'd have like with a clear cut, where deer have very little reason to leave that thicket. They have food in there. But I think just like people, deer sometimes get bored eating the same thing, doing the same thing, and I think they want to come out of there at times. As long as there's not people outside there, you know, trying to kill them every day, you know, the pressure or whatever. There's good reason for them to leave those thickets, you know, to get other food sources or to just move around like they do through the woods, you know.
Yeah, and that was kind of the point behind my question, is because I know there's a difference in especially what's on top, because it can create that food rather than just that hard edge where they can be inside. And, you know, the tough parts about some of the mountain laurel that we have too is you'll find those openings within them, and it might be only 50 yards wide, you know, and they're like little holes or circles inside. And of course, there's always like one or two oak trees in there that are dropping acorns. And when I find that, I think it's just absolute gold. But I put a camera up last year, and I had some deer, but man, to be honest, the bears kind of ruled it. They were the ones that were in and out all the time eating the acorns in those little holes in the mountain laurel. I thought it would have been better for deer, but I come to find where all the rubs and all the sign was on the edges, right on the point, just like you're saying, you know, all around the hill.
Yeah, there's black bear. They love those laurel thickets, but I mean, I'm still trying to kill one of those things. But the deer, I've learned too that, and I've seen that too, where you get into a laurel thicket, you bushwhack to go from A to B, and you find, you know, something in that laurel thicket that makes you want to get in there and hunt. I find that I do more damage than good trying to get into those thickets. Even if there is something in there worth hunting, the noise I make trying to get into that, it just wrecks it for me. Yeah. I found that staying on the edge is conservative maybe in some ways, but I feel like you can get more productive sits that way out of it. And I really like finding, like on laurel thickets, for instance, you know, they often make there's a clear edge between the laurel and the hardwoods or whatever. But if you can find little areas, like little peninsulas that come out off of those, or like maybe a little cluster of laurel that sticks out from the rest of them, that's those little chunks that those bigger bucks that I've found like to bed in. Because if they get deep in that laurel, they're kind of, some of their senses are numbed or whatever. They can't see as far. You know, they are protected. I mean, the odds of something coming in there after them is probably pretty slim, but they can't see. And I feel like that they don't like that. I think they have to look around a little more and see more. and they get that wind at their back coming out of the thicket, and they look out what's in front of them, and it's almost bulletproof. I mean, if you get, like they're on the high ground, they have a cluster of laurel they're bedding beside, and they got the laurel thicket behind them. Nothing's coming from their backside. They smell it, and they can see everything in front of them. I mean, killing a deer like that, when you find those beds, you got to respect those deer. You're like, man, this thing is smart.
Yep.
Like, they just got it figured out. And, that's where you got to look at where you can get them maybe down the ridge a little further. If they move from that bed to feed on an oak flat, maybe there's a pinch point or something there, or whatever,
Yeah, you are describing to a T some of the spots that we hunt and the same experiences that I've gone through, and I agree with you 100%. When you get into those thickets and those laurels and whatnot, and I've never hunted inside them, I've hung cameras just to see what's going on. I agree with you. One, there's not like typically from there's not 2 or 3 clear escape routes. So what I've seen is what you're saying, those deer will sit, especially those bucks, they will literally lay right on the edge of that mountain laurel with the mountain laurel to their back. And typically, like you're saying, the wind blowing from the mountain laurel to them, and they're watching the open woods. And I think it was last year or the year before we were rifle hunting. It was either the second day or, that first weekend after there's been some pressure and people been kicking around quite a bit. And we started walking around this edge of this mountain laurel, and it was up on top, and then there was like a bull, and then it came up on the other side. And again, the mountain laurel kind of went in and then came back out around on the other point. And sure as shit, man, I got up, and as soon as I crested that hill, and I was coming in from one of the only main parking areas and access points, as soon as my head peaked that hill, 2 big bucks jumped up from across the hillside. They were laying opposite of me, up against the mountain laurel, looking my way. And as soon as they see me, they took off straight down the hill into the abyss. I mean, gone, like over the hill, gone forever, down towards, X name creek that I can't mention. But ultimate safety. And it was just amazing. It was an eye-opener, like, because you walk that edge, and it was the first time back there. It was a new area for me. I'm walking that edge, and I'm, seeing all this sign. There's just rubs and scrapes and all this feeding sign, and there's droppings. And then I'm like marking it on Onyx and going through, and I'm kind of just having a great time scouting, and I'm really hunting with a gun. But, for me, that's just kind of a more or less walk in the woods, figure out new areas up there anyhow. And, yeah, sure as shit, there they were, those 2 really nice bucks, big 8 points, and I think a couple doe were laying with them, and they were just doing exactly what you mentioned.
Now, one nice thing about that, and I bump deer all the time too, is I try to, when that happens, like, at that moment, document everything I can that I learned at that moment about those deer. I mean, I would look at the weather and drop milkweed and see which way is the wind blowing, what's the forecasted wind and which actual wind, because you know how that is in the big woods or anywhere there's terrain that can be different. Time of day, because like a few years ago, I was scouting in Maryland in preparation for the opening of the season. And it was it was August, maybe late July, and I bumped 2 buck off this point that were bedded in the middle of the day. And I took a second, I noted everything I could about it. And it just so happened the first day of the season, we had the same forecast initially in the morning, but around 2-3 p.m. it was supposed to actually start turning as the weather system was coming in. So I thought, well, I'm going to try to get in there in the evening and maybe catch them coming off that point. And maybe if that wind does shift, they'll get up and move even earlier, when the wind shifts. Sure as shit, I went down there after night shift. I worked all night, was tired. My plan was to get into the tree at like 2 in the afternoon and then sleep for like 2 hours and then maybe hunt the evening, like I was going to sleep in my tree stand. That was my plan. I got in that tree and I was in the tree 20 minutes. I was just getting comfy to take my nap and I heard a stick break and I turned around and I'm not 100% sure it was the same 2 buck, but 2 buck were coming to me at just about 3 p.m., full velvet coming to me, and I killed the one.
Wow.
And it worked out perfect. I mean, like, I couldn't believe how it came together, bumping them out of their beds, seeing that. And the reason I know the reason they got up was that at that moment when I shot, I could feel the wind had changed. That wind shift they were forecasting had come. Those deer, I assume, were moving to relocate. They probably would have rebedded before, they would have got up to feed for the night. But I cut them off, in that route to relocate, their bedding. And that was the first day in Maryland. It was first ever velvet buck, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome, dude. You played it perfectly too. I really like that. Those shifting winds, I look for that a lot, especially like you're saying when you have a known forecast that you're looking for. Sometimes I'll wait until I'm going to get that shift to the wind that I need, and I'll try to get there just before that. And like you're saying, you'll get them on that pattern, that shift pattern from one bed to the other to where the wind's favorable for them. So great tactics, man. It really is. That's a great tactic.
Well, and, you know, and also like to also just to kind of add to that a little bit, the jumping those deer, you know, bumping those deer like you did or I did that day, you know, if you can document what went down, where they ran,
yep,
that kind of thing. I mean, you know, you could, you know, you could set up on that escape route the next year in rifle season, and maybe somebody else, or you give your buddy $5 to put his head up over that hill and spook those deer down to you, whatever you need to do, you know, do a drive or whatever, but it might put you in position. Like, that's what I mean. Like, it, you know, it's so like cumulative, the knowledge in the woods and like, and what you can learn. And I mean, I know people that keep journals. I'm still like, I still do a pretty good job of remembering a lot of stuff on my own. But I mean, as I get older, I'll try to write this stuff down. But all that stuff that you can learn and you see happen, you can either shake it off as, man, I screwed that up today, or you can learn from it and make something happen the next day or the next year or whatever, you know?
Yep. And we got something in store for him, exactly what you're saying. And it was only a matter of, you know, I was with a buddy of mine and my younger brother, and we were kind of spread out. We were all creeping through the woods, and we weren't doing a drive or anything. But if they would have been another 50 yards ahead of me, rather than me kind of being a little bit out in front of them, maybe they would have got a crack at those pretty nice deer. But we have a plan for him. The plan was this last year was to get a kayak and go across the creek and then get on the bottom after about a week, or, you know, maybe even just the first day of rifle after everybody kind of pushes them all down over the hill. Because once you see them do that, you kind of start to realize, oh, okay, they feel pressure. Where do they first go? Down over the hill where nobody else is going. Makes perfect sense. And then seeing some other people that are kind of local doing that same thing, having success, it's all starting to click. You know, that's something we need to do. So this year, maybe that's kind of in the works. We'll see what happens, but that's definitely something learned. Where what you said, you know, it's not just, oh crap, blew out some deer, missed opportunity, let's see if I can get another one somewhere else. No, it was definitely a learning experience, something that showed me what they do when they see pressure and how they set up to face pressure. So yeah, looking forward to it.
You mentioned earlier when you asked me about my hunting resume about the sika deer hunting too.
Yeah.
I feel like because I'm getting ready to do that here soon, that I want to mention that a little bit, because it's something that I think is cool. And I think people that are from PA and the Northeast, they don't realize what they have right down the street, literally, that they can hunt. Yeah. It's so awesome. The Eastern Shore is just a cool place, and going down for sika is just a lot of fun. They're the miniature elk, you know, they live in a limited area on the Eastern Shore and in Virginia as well, and down at Assateague Island is another place you can go for them. But, you know, going down there and hunting those things where you got to walk through the frag grass 8 feet high, when you're so used to trying to be stealthy in Pennsylvania, sneaking into spots, there's no way to sneak into these spots. You are going to make noise. And, you know, that we talked about, you know, different ways of, you know, going into areas to hunt. When I hunt sika deer, it's totally different. You know, it's a whole different kind of hunting. You're going to make noise, but these deer are curious. They come to noise. They want to see what it is. So you can use it to your advantage, you know, and it's pretty fun stuff. So, you know, I talked to you earlier before we started the podcast about, you know, if you ever want to get into that, I'd love to, you know, meet you guys and we'll go try it sometime. It'd be cool.
Well, I think here's what we'll do, Jason. I think we'll have you back on when I have Austin with me as well. And we will have you on for a sika deer episode because I know he is just as jacked as I am about doing something like that. So I think he would appreciate it if we hung back and got you back on and then had him join us. I think that would be amazing because I am just as crazy and curious about it all as he is. So I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, you know how it is, like when you, as a hunter, you know, you kind of like, you talk to me a little bit too about you're getting into turkey hunting more now and stuff.
Yep.
You know, you try to find these, you get a love for hunting, and you know, archery season or whatever your favorite season is only occupies a part of the year. But if you're like me, you know, you probably scout the rest of the year. But there's also those times when you want to get in the woods and, you know, and hunt. So spring turkey for me, I love that. Sika hunting for me, because Sika's, the prime time you hunt them is middle of October, when it's technically the lull for whitetail. So, you know, we're going to call it that. So, you know, all these periods of time, it stacks up. And that's why I got a very patient wife, because I'm always trying to hunt or prep for hunting something. So
I can definitely relate there as well. So that's awesome, man. And, you know, I can't let you go without a really good story. If you have one in mind, we always ask our guests to kind of give their favorite outdoor story, whether it's, you know, a success story, a blunder, whatnot. But I want you to kind of sign us off with a good story if you got one in mind. Yeah,
sure. I mean, I'm going to talk to you about the story I have. It happened, I think it was on 2005 or whatever. It was right when I first started getting into, you know, trying to target bigger deer.
Excellent.
So I had gone hunting the night before, and right at last light, I shot at a doe, and I wasn't 100% sure if I hit her or not. I was still, you know, kind of new as a hunter, and I wasn't 100% sure what was going on, and I thought I missed her, but I couldn't find my arrow. So the next day, it was supposed to be high winds. Like, I think the winds were like gusting to 35 miles per hour that day. So rather than go hunting, I had my dad and my grandfather join me to where I hunted the night before to try to figure out what happened with this doe. So we didn't hunt that morning, right? We went and looked and found the arrow. There was no blood on it. I had missed her clean. So we were kind of like, my dad and I wanted to hunt together that day, but with the high winds, we didn't know what to do. So kind of back to my kind of adaptive, like, drives to hunt spirit, I decided that we should maybe go try doing a couple little archery drives in these clusters of, like, they're probably anywhere from like 2 to 10 acre chunks of woods surrounded by field. So not very big pieces of woods, but the deer will hold up in these chunks of woods, and a lot of times they're hard to get out or hard to approach, like for normal hunting, but little pushes can get them moving and maybe get you some shooting. So my dad and I got a couple other buddies, my friend Jim and my grandfather and I, so it's 4 of us. We went out midday. This was November 4th, I believe. The only reason I remember this, I don't know how I remember that. I don't know, but it was November 4th. So, like, you know, the time of year that everybody probably would want to be in a tree stand hunting traditionally, like rut type stuff. My dad and my friend, my grandfather and I went out to do deer drives with our bow. So, you know, we kind of like adapted the situation, and we did some we started doing pushes. I pushed to my dad first. He saw a couple doe. That was it. My dad and grandfather sat up for the next drive, and my buddy Jim and I were walking in the edge of the thicket just inside the woods to push it back to my dad. And I looked up, and I saw this deer coming toward me. And I'll never forget, like, you know, you see a deer kind of sneaking through the thick stuff. I don't know why he was coming into the drive. I don't know what he was doing, but he was on his feet on his own, and he popped his head up, and it was this really, really nice 11 point. And I was like, no way. Like, and my buddy Jim was about 10 feet to my right. He saw me crouch down and knock an arrow. He said, what are you doing? Like, you know, he's mouthing all this to me. And this freaking great buck comes down, stops at 30 yards, turns broadside, and I drill this deer. And I was so excited that because I was kind of dejected from the night before missing that doe. And, you know, I made a great shot. And when I stood up, I still remember, because at that time of year, you have to wear an orange hat. You had to wear orange stationary. I still remember seeing I was only about 50 yards from my dad. I could still see him. And I called my dad, and I'm like, Dad, I just shot a great buck. He's like, I can still see you. What are you talking about? But it was so fun, and it was like a perfect, like, it worked out perfect with my dad and grandfather too, but it was just the way that we kind of adapted the situation. And rather than, like, I think some guys probably weren't even hunting that day because it was so windy. Yeah. We found a way to get out. We found a way to get it done. And it just was so nice being there with my family and friends and just sharing it. It was like a perfect hunt. So that was a good one that I remember. Now that I'm doing, like, the filming of hunting, like, I'm with a great group of guys right now. And, like, Lane, you met Lane, or you talked to Lane before. Yep. But there's several other guys that are part of, like, the In the Presence thing. And I never filmed hunting before, but I do love that now that I can go back and watch the hunts and share it. I'm not a great storyteller, obviously, but I can share this. I can share the hunts now with my friends and family, and I love doing that. Like, it's so awesome. I don't care about anything else as far as, like, someone's like, you're going to be famous someday. I'm like, no, I'm not. They're just joking with me, you know what I mean? But it's more the matter of, like, the idea that I can share the hunts with people and actually show them the videos. So I really like, you know, do that now. And, you know, trying to get that doe I shot yesterday, I got on film. So, you know, that'll be on our channel here soon. It'll be pretty cool.
Well, For the first time tonight, I have to disagree with you. I think you're a damn good storyteller, and I think that was an amazing story. That's what it's all about, man. Doing it with your family, and then, you know, having everyone there with you and killing them off the ground and everything else is just unbelievable. You know, where I agree with you, some people would probably have gotten frustrated or looked at the weather forecast, and it's just too easy to say, too windy out there, I'll go tomorrow. You know, in those I'll go tomorrow days seem to be the best. You know, whether it's a little bit of rain or wind or whatnot, those always seem to be the best days. So incredible, man.
Yeah,
Absolutely incredible.
It was great. It was good stuff, yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny because I've actually seen some of your guys' videos prior to, you know, Lane reaching out. And I believe it was Lane on Instagram, and watching some of I remember his video he sent over to us, and I was like, hey, I've actually seen this already. I watch a lot of YouTube hunting videos, and especially local videos, and that's one of the ones that came up that reminded me, and then I found the channel through that.
Well, the reason I brought it up was because, like, when you said thing about a hunt to talk about, last year the buck I killed in PA, there was a lot of ups and downs, and I was able to video a lot of the ups and downs, and that's what's cool now, is that I was going to tell that story, but I was like, well, heck, someone just could watch the video of it. That's why I opted for the 11-point story. But I mean, I think that I like talking to people about hunting. It's great to do that. I love what we're doing right now, and I like learning like what people have to say and how they approach things. Like you just talking about how you leave your cameras in the woods and stuff. Like I learned stuff from you tonight that I can take with me to the woods. I just love that. That's just great.
Yeah, that's why we started this, man. You know, it's like deer camp, right? And you're talking deer hunting with buddies, and like you said from the beginning, you know, we're definitely going to be buddies from here on out. That's what it's all about, right? You know, it's a different bond with hunters.
Maybe next time we could do it, or next time we could do it on an actual fire or something, like a true deer camp situation.
Heck yeah. We're not that far apart. Why not, right?
Yeah, it'd be cool. Heck yeah.
I'm on my little mobile recorder right now. I can bring this thing anywhere. We can do it. But yeah, definitely, dude. So why don't you go ahead and give a shout out to In the Presence Hunt, and on, you know, wherever they can find it, where they can find you, and we'll get this thing signed off.
That'd be cool. Yeah. Everybody, like I said, I'm with a great group of guys, pretty much like just working class people that are out on their days off, or, you know, limited vacation time, whatever. We occasionally go, like Mitch goes to South Carolina occasionally, like to hunt out of state, or like with an outfitter. But most of our hunts are public land or on, like, you know, private, we get permission on or whatever. But yeah, we try to film our hunts, and it's on In the Presence Outdoors. We have a YouTube channel. Check out our videos. We do everything from whitetail, turkey, sika. We have somebody getting, using falconry or whatever, catch some rabbits with hawks. It's pretty cool. And we also have a website. We just came out with some pretty cool gear, you know, different shirts and things we kind of made up. So I'm going to try to like change or go off topic here real quick, but the one spot I access, I actually have to put a mountain bike in my kayak to row part of the way. So awesome. I actually made a shirt up where it's kind of a silhouette of me rowing a kayak with my mountain bike in my kayak. It's on our website. It's pretty cool. So yeah, just check out all that stuff. It's I really appreciate it. You know, going over there and watching our videos, and, you know, like and subscribe, do all that. You know, the YouTube thing.
You need to title that shirt "Triathlon Deer Hunter" or something along those lines. I think that'd be hilarious.
I wrote underneath it, "Solutions, not excuses," because you know, like in my career where I work and just, you know, daily life, but also in hunting, you know, you always hear people that, you know, why they can't go to that spot, or why they won't go to the top of that mountain. I'm like, figure out a way. You know, if you can figure out a way, you're probably going to be better off. You know, finding solutions, not excuses.
Well, that is a great thing to sign off on, and I can't say thank you enough, Jason. Appreciate it, man. Congratulations on the 2 Maryland doe. You got definitely the monkey off your back early. Got a couple deer on the ground already, and I am absolutely thrilled and excited to see what you come up with for the rest of the season. Can't wait to see the videos that come out and continue to watch you guys succeed. Love the channel, love what you guys are doing, and I can't say thank you enough.
Thank you very much, and thank you, everybody, for taking the time to listen to this. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. Appreciate it. And in honor of Austin not being here tonight, congratulations on the baby, Austin. I will sign it off.
Congratulations.
The distraction is real.